Hello and welcome to Whispered Legends. I am your storyteller, and I'm thrilled to have you here. Get ready to journey into tales of mystery, adventure, and the unknown. If you love stories that spark your imagination, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a whisper. Now, let's begin today's tale. The Mothman, a winged harbinger of doom. The Mothman legend is one of the most chilling and mysterious urban legends to emerge from the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in the 1960s. The story of the Mothman is intertwined with real-life tragedy and unexplained phenomena, making it a terrifying tale that has persisted for decades. It all began on November 15, 1966, when two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Millette, were driving near the TNT area, an abandoned munitions site just outside of Point Pleasant. As they cruised along the road, their car suddenly stopped at the sight of a strange figure near the old power plant. At first, they thought it was a large man, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was something far more terrifying. The creature was about 7 feet tall, with large, bat-like wings that stretched far beyond its body. Its eyes were described as glowing red, and it appeared to move unnaturally fast, flying at an incredible speed and keeping up with their car as they sped away in panic. The creature reportedly let out an eerie screech that was described as a mix between a high-pitched scream and the sound of wings flapping. The terrified couples immediately reported the sighting to the police. Despite their claims, the authorities were skeptical, dismissing it as a case of mistaken identity. However, other locals soon began coming forward with their own terrifying stories of similar encounters with a large, winged creature. Over the next few days, sightings of the Mothman continued to pour in. Residents of Point Pleasant reported seeing the creature hovering around the area near the old munitions plant, perched on trees, and flying over fields. Witnesses described the Mothman as a humanoid figure with glowing red eyes, a massive wingspan, and an unsettling presence. Some described it as having an almost bird-like body, while others reported it as more human-like, with an eerie, unblinking stare that seemed to follow them. One of the most chilling accounts came from an elderly woman named Catherine May, who saw the Mothman on her property near the outskirts of town. She reported that the creature had landed on her porch, its wings flapping loudly, and stared at her with its glowing eyes. She said she felt an overwhelming sense of dread as it seemed to silently watch her for several minutes before flying off into the night. What made the Mothman legend even more terrifying was the association between the creature's sightings and a real-life disaster. In the months leading up to the tragedy, multiple reports of the Mothman were made by residents who claimed to have seen the creature near the Silver Bridge, a vital suspension bridge that connected Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio. On December 15, 1967, just over a year after the first sighting of the Mothman, the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour, sending dozens of vehicles plunging into the icy waters of the Ohio River. The collapse resulted in the deaths of 46 people. It was later determined that the bridge's structural integrity had been compromised by a defective eye-bar, leading to its catastrophic failure. Many residents of Point Pleasant believed that the Mothman's presence in the area before the disaster was no coincidence. Some claimed that the creature had been warning them of the impending tragedy, while others believed it was a supernatural harbinger of doom. The Mothman was rumored to have been seen flying over the bridge just days before it collapsed, and some witnesses even claimed they saw the creature hovering near the bridge at the exact time of the disaster. After the Silver Bridge collapse, the sightings of the Mothman mysteriously ceased. No more reports of the creature surfaced in Point Pleasant, and it seemed to vanish from the public eye as quickly as it had appeared. Some speculate that the Mothman had completed its task, warning the people of Point Pleasant about the impending disaster, and had left. However, others believe that the Mothman has not disappeared at all, but simply shifted its haunting presence to other parts of the country. There have been sporadic reports of sightings in other locations, particularly in areas where major disasters or tragedies are about to occur. Some even suggest that the Mothman is a kind of supernatural entity, linked to global events and natural catastrophes, appearing as a warning before disaster strikes. The Mothman legend has sparked numerous theories and interpretations over the years. Some believe that the creature is an extraterrestrial being, perhaps an alien or a creature from another dimension, with its appearance serving as a sign or omen of things to come. Others believe it could be an undiscovered species of giant bird or bat, misidentified by frightened witnesses. Still, others theorize that the Mothman could be a cryptid, a creature from folklore, a mutated creature, or even a spiritual entity connected to the supernatural. In the years following the events in Point Pleasant, books, documentaries, and movies were made about the Mothman. The most famous of these was the 2002 film The Mothman Prophecies, based on the book by John Keel, which dramatized the events surrounding the sightings and the eventual collapse of the Silver Bridge. The film, along with Keel's book, brought the Mothman legend back into the public consciousness and further solidified it as a modern urban legend. To this day, Point Pleasant remains the heart of Mothman lore. The town holds an annual Mothman festival, drawing thousands of people from around the world who are fascinated by the mystery of the creature. Visitors can explore the Mothman Museum, which houses artifacts, photographs, and evidence from the original sightings. The museum also features a statue of the Mothman, which stands as a reminder of the strange events that forever changed the town's history. Whether or not the Mothman was truly a harbinger of doom or a misunderstood creature is still debated. But for the people of Point Pleasant and the countless others who have heard the story, the Mothman remains one of the most eerie and unsettling urban legends of all time, forever tied to a tragic chapter in American history. What makes the Mothman story particularly eerie is not just the creature itself, but the sense of unease it continues to evoke. The idea that this winged figure could appear before a tragedy, warning of disaster or simply haunting the living, taps into a universal fear of the unknown and the inexplicable. In a world where tragedy often strikes without warning, the Mothman serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the possibility that some forces are beyond human understanding. The legend of the Mothman, whether real or imagined, will undoubtedly continue to captivate and terrify for generations to come. Slender Man. Slender Man. A Slender Man, one of the most chilling and infamous urban legends of the digital age, is a tall, faceless humanoid figure with unnaturally long limbs, often depicted wearing a black suit. His haunting presence, especially in the context of the woods, has terrified countless people around the world. However, the most terrifying aspect of the Slender Man legend is not merely the creature itself but the real-life horror story that unfolded in 2014, when two young girls brutally attacked their friend, believing they needed to do so to please Slender Man. Slender Man is said to lurk in forests or abandoned places, often targeting children. He is depicted as having a featureless white face and wearing a dark suit, with tentacle-like appendages or unnaturally elongated arms, which he uses to either capture or torment his victims. The creature is known to stalk children, and in some versions of the legend, he can control minds, causing his victims to act against their will. The legend of Slender Man became widespread on the internet, particularly through creepypasta, a genre of short horror stories shared online. In these tales, Slender Man is not just a silent observer but a terrifying, malevolent force that controls and manipulates the minds of children, convincing them to commit violent acts or even take their own lives. The legend of Slender Man took a horrifying turn in May 2014 when two 12-year-old girls from Waukesha, Wisconsin, stabbed their friend, Peyton Lutner, 19 times in a nearby forest. The attack, later known as the Slender Man stabbing, was not just a random act of violence. The two girls, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Wire, had convinced themselves that killing Peyton was the only way to prove their loyalty to Slender Man, whom they believed was real. Morgan Geyser, one of the attackers, had been obsessed with Slender Man for months. She and Anissa had both read about him on the internet and believed he was a real entity who lived in a mansion in the woods. The girls believed that Slender Man would kill their families if they did not carry out the murder. They thought by killing their friend, they would be inducted into Slender Man's service and be protected from his wrath. On the day of the attack, the girls invited Peyton to join them for a birthday party at a nearby park. When they reached the secluded area, they lured Peyton into a wooded area, under the pretense of playing a game. Once there, they attacked her with a knife, stabbing her 19 times in various parts of her body. The injuries were life-threatening. Peyton was stabbed in the chest, abdomen, and arms, with some of the wounds barely missing vital organs like her heart and lungs. After the attack, the two girls calmly walked away from the scene. They did not call for help, but instead, they went on with their day, leaving Peyton to die in the woods. Miraculously, Peyton managed to crawl out of the woods, and a passing cyclist found her. When the authorities caught up with Morgan and Anissa, they explained that they had attacked their friend to prove themselves to Slender Man. Both girls were arrested and charged with attempted murder. During their trials, it became clear that both girls had been heavily influenced by their belief in the Slender Man legend. Morgan Geyser, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, was found to be experiencing psychotic episodes during the attack, believing Slender Man was real and watching her. Anissa, on the other hand, showed signs of being deeply influenced by Morgan and participated in the stabbing out of fear and loyalty to her friend. The case shocked the nation, drawing attention to the potential dangers of online content, particularly for vulnerable children who may be susceptible to the darker side of internet subcultures. It also highlighted the mental health struggles that can go unnoticed in young people, leading to the tragic and violent act. Morgan Geyser was found to be not guilty by reason of mental illness and was sentenced to 40 years in a psychiatric facility. Anissa Wire, though not as mentally ill, was also found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in a mental health institution. The tragic story of Peyton Luttner's near-death and the horrors of the Slender Man stabbing became a real-life manifestation of the fears surrounding the power of online myths and the impact they can have on impressionable minds. The Slender Man stabbing case brought the urban legend into sharp focus, blurring the lines between myth and reality. The chilling story of two young girls believing in an internet creature so deeply that they committed such an atrocity was both heartbreaking and terrifying. The story was widely covered in the media, further solidifying Slender Man as one of the most infamous urban legends in modern times. Though Slender Man is still a widely circulated and popular figure in horror culture, particularly in creepypasta stories, the real-life tragedy of the Waukesha stabbing serves as a stark reminder of how urban legends, especially when combined with online culture, can have dangerous and terrifying consequences. Slender Man, a once fictional character, became a symbol of the destructive power of online myths, and the legacy of the 2014 stabbing continues to haunt both the survivors and those who came across the story. For Peyton Luttner, who miraculously survived the brutal attack, the haunting reminder of that day never fully fades. For the girls involved in the crime, their belief in Slender Man and the violence they committed continue to serve as a chilling cautionary tale about the dangers of the dark side of internet lore. The Slender Man legend, once a terrifying myth, was brought to life in the most horrifying way imaginable. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is one of the most chilling urban legends that has haunted drivers for decades. The story has been told in different variations across the globe, but its essence remains the same: a mysterious hitchhiker, typically a young woman, who disappears without a trace during a ride, leaving the driver shaken and confused. One of the most famous versions of the Vanishing Hitchhiker took place in the 1950s along the dark, winding roads of America. This version of the story, though it has been told countless times since, is often referred to as the Ghost of Resurrection Mary. In the heart of Chicago, near Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, Illinois, a chilling tale began to circulate among locals in the 1930s and 1940s. It was said that on cold, foggy nights, drivers passing by the cemetery often reported seeing a young woman standing alone by the side of the road. She was dressed in a long white gown, with her blonde hair flowing freely, and she looked out of place in the darkness of the night. The woman, now known as Mary, would stand there, looking like she was waiting for a ride. She seemed lost, vulnerable, and out of place, drawing the sympathy of passing drivers who would stop and offer her a lift. Typically, she would ask to be driven to Resurrection Cemetery, a few miles away, a ride that many drivers found strange, as it seemed like a random request for someone who was supposed to be in distress. What made the story even more unsettling was what happened next. As soon as the car would approach the cemetery, Mary would suddenly vanish. One moment, she was sitting in the car, chatting politely with the driver, the next, she was gone, without a trace, as if she had evaporated into thin air. Drivers would stop the car, search the area in confusion, but find no sign of her. There was no trace of footprints, no sound of running feet, just the eerie silence of the night. Some drivers, too frightened to continue, would rush home, haunted by the experience. Others, perplexed and wanting answers, would go to Resurrection Cemetery, where they would inquire about the young woman. In some versions of the story, the drivers would be told that no woman had ever been seen at the cemetery that night, or that the person they described matched the physical appearance of a young woman who had died many years ago. According to local legend, the woman's name was Mary, and she was a young woman who tragically died in a car accident on the night of a dance in the 1930s. Mary had been out dancing with her friends and was returning home when she was struck by a vehicle on a dark road near the cemetery. The crash was fatal, and she was buried in Resurrection Cemetery. Her spirit, it is said, never truly left, and she now roams the area as a ghostly hitchhiker. The version of the story that most people believe is that Mary's restless spirit is drawn to the place of her death, waiting for a ride home. Her final destination is often described as Resurrection Cemetery, where she seeks to reunite with the place where she was buried. Numerous reports from people who claim to have encountered the vanishing hitchhiker near Resurrection Cemetery support the eerie legend. One particularly well-known encounter happened in the 1970s, when a man, Jim, was driving down Archer Avenue near the cemetery late at night. He was alone and thought nothing of the fog that had started to roll in. When he saw a figure by the side of the road, he slowed down, feeling compelled to offer a ride. The woman, wearing a white gown and with blonde hair that shone faintly in the moonlight, climbed into the car without a word. She was quiet at first, sitting with her hands folded in her lap, but then she started speaking to Jim, telling him she was heading to Resurrection Cemetery. Her voice was gentle, almost soothing, and they talked for a while as Jim drove. She seemed familiar, yet her pale skin and the way she moved were unsettling, as if she wasn't entirely real. When they neared the cemetery, Jim turned to her, but she was no longer in the car. There were no doors opened, no movement, nothing to indicate she had left the car. He pulled over in a panic, searching for her, but she was gone. Frantic, Jim drove straight to Resurrection Cemetery, hoping to find some clue to explain the strange occurrence. The guard at the cemetery informed him that no one matching the description of the woman had been seen recently, yet Jim's mind couldn't escape the haunting feeling that he had just given a ride to a ghost. The tale of the vanishing hitchhiker is so terrifying because it taps into universal fears, death, the supernatural, and the uncertainty of the unknown. The idea that a seemingly innocent encounter with a vulnerable person could turn into a chilling experience is what makes it so disturbing. For many, the thought of picking up a hitchhiker seems harmless, but the vanishing hitchhiker legend turns this everyday occurrence into a nightmare. It plays on the fear of being unknowingly involved in something sinister, where even a simple gesture of kindness, offering a ride, leads to an encounter with the supernatural. Even today, people continue to claim to have seen Resurrection Mary or similar versions of the vanishing hitchhiker in different places around the world. These sightings share the same eerie pattern: a lone figure waiting by the side of a dark road, a ride offered, and then a sudden, inexplicable disappearance. One modern-day version of the story, told by a tourist from England, described a visit to Resurrection Cemetery in the 2000s. They had heard of the legend and, feeling skeptical, decided to explore the area. As they were walking around the cemetery's gates, a young woman wearing a white dress approached them and asked for a ride to the cemetery. The tourist agreed and offered to take her, but before they reached the cemetery gates, the woman suddenly vanished from the car without a sound. Perplexed, the tourist returned to the gates of the cemetery, but there was no sign of her. Though many try to rationalize these stories with logical explanations, like misidentifications, hoaxes, or psychological effects, the legend of the vanishing hitchhiker persists, capturing the imagination of those who hear it. The vanishing hitchhiker, particularly the story of Resurrection Mary, remains one of the most chilling urban legends. Whether it's a true ghost story, a collective delusion, or just another piece of folklore, it continues to haunt the minds of those who encounter it. It reminds us that not all encounters on the road are what they seem, and some stories linger long after the car has driven away. The haunted arcade game, Polybius. Polybius is one of the most infamous and chilling urban legends in the world of video games. The story goes that, in the early 1980s, an arcade game called Polybius mysteriously appeared in several arcades around Portland, Oregon, before disappearing as quickly as it had come. The game was said to cause strange and unsettling effects on those who played it, including intense nausea, memory loss, violent behavior, and even death. To this day, no concrete evidence of its existence has ever been found, making it one of the most frightening and enduring tales in the realm of video game folklore. The story of Polybius begins in 1981, when players at arcades in Portland began to notice something strange about a new game that had been installed. The game, which was unlike anything else in the arcade, had a unique and hypnotic gameplay style, with flashing colors, disorienting patterns, and an unsettling sound design. Players who dared to step up to the cabinet found themselves drawn into a maze-like world of geometric shapes and pulsating lights. It was a futuristic, almost alien experience that left many feeling uncomfortably altered after playing. Soon after Polybius was introduced, strange occurrences were reported. People who played the game began to experience severe side effects. Some became disoriented, feeling nauseous or dizzy, while others reported suffering from memory loss, blackouts, or vivid, unsettling dreams. Several players even claimed to have had hallucinations during or after playing the game. Some said they saw strange figures or heard voices whispering to them, while others believed the game had a mind-altering effect, causing them to feel paranoid or out of control. But it wasn't just the physical effects that made Polybius so terrifying, it was the people who controlled the game. According to the legend, men in black suits were said to visit the arcades regularly, monitoring the game's usage. These mysterious figures were said to take notes and collect data, leading to speculation that the game was part of some kind of government experiment in mind control or psychological manipulation. The idea that something so sinister could be embedded in an innocent-seeming arcade game made the whole situation feel even more dystopian and ominous. The most unsettling part of the Polybius legend was the devastating effects it had on some players. Some individuals reported violent behavior after playing, losing control of their actions or becoming unusually aggressive. The game was said to induce strong psychological reactions, making players question their own sanity. The idea that a simple arcade game could cause such a powerful and lasting impact on the mind made Polybius even more chilling. In addition to mental disturbances, some players experienced physical symptoms such as seizures, fainting, and intense headaches. A few even claimed to have died after playing the game, though these reports were mostly anecdotal and difficult to verify. Still, the rumors of fatal consequences added a sinister layer to the legend of Polybius, making it one of the most terrifying stories to emerge from the video game community. One of the most famous reports involved a young man who allegedly played Polybius for hours on end. He was said to have become increasingly agitated and paranoid, claiming that the game had told him things about his future and whispered terrible truths into his mind. Shortly after, he was found in a disoriented state, claiming he could no longer differentiate between reality and the game. As the tale goes, he was hospitalized for psychological distress and never fully recovered from his experience. Despite the growing number of disturbing stories surrounding the game, Polybius mysteriously vanished from the arcades as quickly as it had appeared. By the end of 1981, all known machines were said to have been removed, leaving behind only rumors and half-remembered experiences. The men in black suits were also reported to have disappeared, further fueling the idea that Polybius was part of a covert government operation. Some claimed that the game was shut down because of the dangerous effects it had on players, while others believed that it had been removed as part of a government cover-up. Conspiracy theorists suggested that Polybius was a mind control experiment designed to test the effects of subliminal messaging and altered perceptions. Whether the government was behind the game or it was merely a figment of collective imagination, its disappearance only added to the mystery and fear surrounding it. Over the years, the legend of Polybius has grown, fueled by the internet and the widespread fascination with conspiracy theories. Despite extensive research, no one has ever found an original Polybius machine, nor has anyone provided solid proof that the game even existed beyond rumors and anecdotal accounts. Some believe that the game was a product of collective hysteria or a clever hoax, while others remain convinced that Polybius was part of a much larger and darker plot. The myth of Polybius has inspired countless articles, books, and even video games, adding to its enigmatic legacy. Some modern-day games and films have used the concept of a mind-controlling arcade game as a way to pay homage to the legend or to further explore the themes of technology, mind control, and government conspiracy. For example, the video game Polybius, released in 2017, brings the urban legend to life, allowing players to experience the disturbing, hypnotic gameplay that is said to have caused so many people to lose control of their minds. The story of Polybius remains a fascinating and terrifying urban legend, largely because of the mystery surrounding it. The combination of a seemingly innocent arcade game, sinister government involvement, and the horrifying effects on those who played it creates an unsettling narrative that continues to haunt the minds of those who hear it. Whether Polybius was a hoax, a psychological experiment, or something much darker, the legend endures, ensuring that the eerie tale of the haunted arcade game lives on in the collective imagination. Despite the widespread popularity of the Polybius legend, most believe that the game is purely fictional. The earliest mentions of Polybius appear to be part of an internet hoax in the early 2000s, where people began creating elaborate backstories for the game. While some argue that the conspiracy and the eerie nature of the story are too compelling to dismiss, there is little to no solid evidence to suggest that Polybius ever truly existed. Nonetheless, the mystery surrounding it remains, with its blend of retro arcade culture, mind control paranoia, and the fear of government experimentation. Even if Polybius was never real, it has secured a permanent place in the folklore of the digital age, symbolizing our collective anxieties about technology and control. The Black-Eyed Children. The Black-Eyed Children, BEC, are a chilling urban legend that has been circulating since the late 1990s, particularly in the United States. These entities are described as children, usually between the ages of 6 and 16, with pale skin, dark clothing, and the most disturbing characteristic, completely black eyes. Their eerie, soulless gaze is often described as one of the most unsettling aspects of their appearance, and it is said to instill an overwhelming sense of dread in anyone who encounters them. One of the earliest and most well-known reports comes from a man named Brian Bethel, a journalist from Texas. Bethel shared his story on an online forum in 1998, which ultimately helped to spread the legend of the Black-Eyed Children. According to Bethel, he was parked in his car in a quiet part of town, writing a check for his internet bill. It was late in the evening, and the streets were mostly empty. His peaceful moment, however, would soon be shattered. As he was sitting in the car, Bethel noticed two children, an unusually pale boy and a girl, approaching him. They were dressed in outdated clothing, which seemed odd to him. The boy was around 9 or 10 years old, while the girl appeared to be younger. They knocked on his car window, and when Bethel rolled it down, the children immediately asked for a ride home. The first thing that struck him as strange was the children's demeanor. They spoke in calm, unthreatening tones, but their behavior was unnervingly persistent. They insisted they needed to get home, despite Bethel's reluctance to offer them a ride. What alarmed him even more, however, was the children's eyes. They were completely black, no whites, no iris, just deep, dark voids staring at him. A sense of terror washed over Bethel. He felt an inexplicable urge to get away from these children as quickly as possible. Despite their polite insistence, something about them felt wrong, almost otherworldly. When he refused to let them in, the children became more insistent, their calm demeanor turning into a chilling, unnatural persistence. Bethel described the feeling as if something was pushing against his will, an invisible force that made him feel he needed to comply with their request. In the end, Bethel drove away in a panic, and as he did, he looked back. The children stood silently in the street, watching him, their black eyes still fixed on him. He later realized that, despite it being late at night, there had been no cars in the area and no sign of where the children might have come from or where they were going. Bethel's encounter was not an isolated one. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of similar sightings of black-eyed children across the United States, and even internationally. These children often appear on doorsteps, knocking or ringing doorbells, asking to be let inside. They typically claim they are cold, lost, or in need of help, but something in their behavior seems off. Some reports say that the children display an unnerving level of knowledge about the person they are interacting with, such as mentioning the person's name or knowing things they should not. The encounters tend to follow a familiar pattern. The children are insistent, polite, and often speak in a monotonous, unnerving tone. They avoid giving specific answers about where they come from or who their parents are. They may also appear at odd hours, often at night or in isolated areas. When it comes to the black eyes, witnesses describe the sensation of being drawn into them. Some report that the black eyes seem to have an almost hypnotic effect, compelling the person to let the children in or to obey their requests. The fear that builds in those who encounter them is often described as a primal, instinctual terror. Many report feeling a sense of danger, as though something terrible will happen if they interact with the children for too long. There are various theories about who or what the black-eyed children are. Some believe they are malevolent spirits or demons, sent to either possess or torment those they encounter. Their dark eyes are seen as an indicator of their supernatural nature, making them unlike ordinary human children. Others speculate that the black-eyed children are alien entities, or even government experiments. The idea of extraterrestrial beings posing as children to gain access to homes and abduct humans fits into the broader narrative of alien abductions and paranormal occurrences. Another theory is that they are the result of a curse, either a product of black magic or some form of ancient ritual. In this scenario, the children would be trapped between worlds, unable to fully pass into the afterlife or remain in the physical world, leading them to seek out human victims in an effort to break their curse. In more contemporary theories, some argue that the black-eyed children are a manifestation of collective fear, a modern folklore creature that has gained traction through online forums and social media. As the stories spread, so too do the experiences, feeding into each other and creating a cycle of sightings. This theory suggests that the BEC may be a product of shared anxiety or fear projected into urban legend. The fear surrounding the black-eyed children is amplified by several elements. First, there is the innate terror of children, who are often seen as innocent and vulnerable, being transformed into something sinister and unnatural. The fact that they appear as children yet are clearly not human in some way disturbs the natural order, making them feel even more unsettling. Second, their persistence in trying to gain entry into people's homes taps into deep-seated fears of home invasion and vulnerability. The Beck's politeness is cold and calculated, almost as if they are manipulating their victims. The lack of any backstory, no clear origin or explanation of where they come from, adds to their enigma, leaving those who encounter them feeling powerless. Finally, the black eyes themselves are perhaps the most terrifying aspect. Eyes are often referred to as windows to the soul, and the idea of a person, or a child, having eyes that are black, empty, and void of any humanity creates an overwhelming sense of dread. It suggests something beyond the natural world, something that is not just different but malevolent. The black-eyed children are one of the most disturbing and unsettling urban legends in modern folklore. They prey on our fears of the unknown, the unnatural, and the loss of control. Though no definitive evidence exists to prove their existence, the chilling stories continue to circulate, fueling the mystery and fear surrounding these strange, dark-eyed beings. Whether they are a manifestation of our collective anxieties or something more sinister, the legend of the black-eyed children endures, a reminder that sometimes, the most terrifying things are the ones we can't explain.